Right down the chute, Kevin Durant.
NBA Lockdown with Bruce Bowen.
Gets it to James. Here's a three for the win. Good! It is good!
The NBA Lockdown Podcast with Bruce Bowen.
Welcome into the NBA Lockdown Podcast alongside Bruce Bowen. I'm Jorge Sedano in for Israel Gutierrez. And Game 1 of the NBA Finals is in the books, and the storyline had everything to do with LeBron James and his cramp.
James comes to the ball side to get it. He's got 5 to shoot. Working on Diaw inside the three-point arc. Good crossover to the glass. Laid it in. LeBron James laid it in. And LeBron James comes up limping again. And he's not even coming out of backcourt. San Antonio's got a 5-on-4. They're signaling for foul. Are they going to get it?
Come on.
Reaching out is Al, and he fouls Ginobili. Finally stops the clock with 3:59 left. And LeBron is not left backcourt. He is still back there in backcourt, holding the quad muscle of the left leg. It may be a cramp.
And that was Kevin Calabro and Hubie Brown on the call on ESPN Radio. All right, so I want you to put your stethoscope on right now, Bruce. I want to know what Dr. Bowen thinks about all the people in social media and all over the sports landscape saying LeBron James should have played through those cramps. Because, you know, a guy like Michael Jordan would have played through those cramps.
Man, you know, that's where we just allow social media to have way too much credit today. Unless you understand what that requires, or unless you understand what it feels like, you have no idea and no right to make assumptions about things that you know nothing of. LeBron James is a world-class athlete. We understand that. So you mean to tell me this world-class athlete who cannot deal with, say, a cramp, and you want to sit up here and compare it that Michael Jordan would have? You don't know what Michael would have done. The fact that he did cramp up due to the circumstances, and the circumstances, unfortunately, was that good old Texas heat. But you don't know how to necessarily prepare for that because of the, I'll say, the spoiling of the NBA, where we have all this wonderful air conditioning. This was one of those throwbacks to high school days that the older players didn't have a problem with it. You didn't hear Tim and Ray, the 38-year-olds, they thought it was probably a Bikram session. But in all seriousness, you can't judge what he goes through in his body. He is a phenomenal athlete. He's in great shape. You cannot equate anything because it's such a distinct description to different people. Whereas some people, they don't get cramps. You know, Ray Allen talked about he only got one when he was sitting down on the couch before. He's never experienced it during the course of a game. So I think it's more about people just stay in your lane. But, of course, that's not what we do, especially with social media.
Yeah, and LeBron, after the game, talked about, what he's going to need. Actually, he talked about in-game. He was talking about the heat and whatnot in-game, about how this thing was possibly affecting him.
Like, you played the whole game already. I'm going to need some colder water now. They're trying to smoke us out of here.
So he thinks he thinks that the Spurs may have been, and I don't know if he was serious or not, was pulling an old Red Auerbach move, Boston Celtics, Los Angeles Lakers, by just turning off the air conditioning. What say you, Bruce Bowen?
No, there was definitely a problem. Trust me, the Spurs organization is not into making everybody in the building suffer because of an opponent. That is not the way they do things here. And it was interesting because it not only affected the Spurs organization, but also the NBA. I saw Adam Silver talking about, what could they do about this? And if something is broken, it's nothing that you can necessarily do to just get it straightened out at that particular moment. It's 11:50 a.m. here in San Antonio right now, and it's still not working in there. They have a concert scheduled for tonight. They have a WNBA game tomorrow, and it's not working even at this moment as we speak. So this is a real situation.
Well, it's funny because, leave it to Pop to be as as contrite as possible when it comes to these type of situations. Here's what Greg Popovich, Spurs head coach, had to say about the AC after the game.
Well, I think everybody got a little tired or a little dehydrated for sure. I'm sure that, both teams are going to be happy that we have a couple of days before the next game, and hopefully we can pay our bills.
Yeah, well, maybe Peter Holt needs to pay the bill. I mean, what happened there, Bruce? Did he have it in, like, someone else's name, or what's going on there? I mean, come on.
Hey, I know Peter is looking at who runs this building, and it's going from everything. I mean, it was such a joke to a lot of people about something that's very serious. You know, the air conditioning company is a big sponsor of the Spurs. So what happens with that sponsorship? Do they look elsewhere, or do they have to fork over more equipment to make sure that something like this doesn't happen? But, you know, it's unfortunate because you want to see the players play at the best of their abilities without anything that can hinder that.
Well, it is an embarrassing situation, too, just in general. I mean, it's funny because we came off the heels a couple of years ago of the lights going out in the Super Bowl, and now we have no AC at an NBA Finals. And it obviously did affect the game in some way, shape, or form because LeBron, the best player on the floor, wasn't able to continue. And I know what's going to happen here. As a Spurs fan listens to this podcast and hears me say this, they're going to be like, you see, you're making excuses. And it's not an excuse. I'm saying it can be both, right? I mean, is it fair to say, Bruce, that LeBron not being able to continue certainly affected the outcome of this game?
Well, I won't say it affected the outcome of the game. I'll say there is an effect of the game, but that has more to do with the Miami supporting cast. We saw Tony Parker not playing the second half of a closeout game in Oklahoma City against Oklahoma City Thunder, and the Spurs went on to win that game in overtime. There was no talk or no saying anything about, oh, well, you know, the team's not doing well because Tony's not on the floor. Tony is the most valuable piece to the San Antonio Spurs, just as LeBron James is to the Miami Heat. But him not finishing the game, you can't just put that completely on the fact that he wasn't there, that they didn't win. What about the other players? Mario Chalmers, he was pathetic yesterday. 1 for 3. He didn't affect the game as far as his ability to have a big impact on the game. He had 5 turnovers, 1 assist. This is your starting point guard. So, you know, you look at that. Then, you know, you can even look at what Norris Cole was able to do as far as shooting 1 for 4. It's more about everyone else picking up their roles and becoming more focused because Miami had the game in hand from the third quarter till the fourth. And that's where I said, they got up to about a 6-point lead or so. And next thing you know, it was done. And I'm like, wow. I think that a lot of that had to do with the fact that they're playing the Spurs. The Spurs never feel like they're out of the game, just as Miami Heat doesn't ever feel like they're out of a game. But I look at their past opponents. When the Heat got to a certain point level above their opponents, sometimes their opponents imploded, and they were able to finish off that team that way. Well, even though they were up against the Spurs continued to fight. And I think it's more about them taking care of the basketball and getting better execution within their offense to sustain those leads.
Well, but Bruce, if you look at it, the way the game unfolded, I mean, it was basically a game of runs. Miami would go up 6 or 7, then the Spurs would go up 6 or 7, and it was just kind of going back and forth. It's a lot harder for Miami, who's not as deep as San Antonio, as you pointed out, to withstand one of those runs if the best player on the planet is on the floor. I mean, to me, it's very difficult to convince me that without LeBron on the floor, that Miami could withstand that run from the Spurs and that LeBron wouldn't have an impact on both ends of the floor in the last 6 to 7 minutes of that game.
Yeah, but, you know, again, it's more about everyone else doing their job as well. There's times where he takes a blow on the floor, out of the game. They still have to sustain it. They still have to play at another level. I think sometimes players, we give them the out by putting all this pressure on LeBron. I think it's more about the other players. I think it's more about Shane Battier having more an effect on the game. I think it's more about Rashard Lewis really taking advantage of his opportunities that he gets. I mean, you look at they shot 47% from the floor. The Spurs shot 58% from the floor. That's almost 60% in a game. So you're not having the effect that's necessary, and everyone can participate on the defensive end.
Right, but they were 14 of 16 in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's an outlier. And I think a lot of that is because LeBron's not there. I mean, he basically he's the guy that spearheads everything for them, offensively, defensively. They didn't shoot the ball very well in that fourth quarter in the last 7 minutes because what I think, Bruce, people are focusing on is the last 4 minutes of the game when he finally came out for good. But he was at the end of the third quarter, he was asking for a blow because of cramps, and that's not something people are focusing on. He normally doesn't come out that early in the third quarter. Then he came back in at the end of the third quarter, came out for his usual rest in the fourth quarter, and still was having issues. So this was something that was kind of going back towards late in the third quarter. This wasn't something that just happened in the last 3 minutes and 59 seconds of this game.
No, but I say that to just emphasize the point that it's important for everyone else to have a hand in it as well. Even when your star player does go down, or even when he is having struggles, it's really important for others to uplift. And it begins with the supporting cast. I get it, and it's unfortunate, but this is the way it is, especially with all the notoriety that LeBron James has received, which is warranted. It's because he is the best, but I think sometimes people have a hard time with, because he is the best, and you have so many people that want to see LeBron succeed. Then you have those that want to see someone else succeed, and as soon as they have an opportunity to delve into something quite like this, he can't keep himself from getting cramps or anything like that, or there is only so much he can do under the circumstances. So I think it's more about, my emphasis is on everyone else has to do their part as well in order for them to have an impact and score. And I don't care if he's on the floor or not. You don't give up 36 points, especially in the fourth quarter.
Here's Heat head coach Eric Spoelstra on losing LeBron late in the fourth quarter.
I think it felt like a punch in the gut when you see your leader limping like that back to the bench. But at the same time, we still had an opportunity to make plays going down the stretch, and they made obviously the biggest plays in the last 5 minutes.
So when you think about it moving forward here now, Bruce, as we get ready for Game 2, obviously you would assume that LeBron will be hydrated and ready to go in Game 2. You mentioned it earlier. To your surprise, to some extent, Miami was in control of that game head into that fourth quarter. What was surprising to you about that particular result, at least up until about 6-7 minutes left in the game when Miami had that 6 or 7 point lead?
Well, it was the fact that they were really affecting San Antonio. They had more to do with San Antonio's turnovers, 23 that is, than anything else. And I was just surprised at how they continued the process. San Antonio's a team that takes care of the basketball, but it was so many balls there that were just, the Heat got a hand on. And so when you have that, usually a team, they'll either figure it out or it's, they get back into it. And it just seemed like at certain situations, it was just like, I can't believe it. Whether it was Tim, whether it was Tony, and the situations, I guess, that surprised me most were that they weren't trying to, it wasn't something so obvious. It had more to do with the defense. And I felt like maybe it was fatigue for Miami Heat, but you just didn't see that same aggression later in the game. At the beginning of the fourth quarter, the Spurs looked like a completely different team. They really emphasized the spirit of, we got to make Miami feel us. We got to get more aggressive on the defensive side, and that's what created some of their transition opportunities. And when that took place, then all the confusion seemed to happen with the Miami Heat.
Bruce, moving forward again as we continue to forward this series right now, with those 23 turnovers, what does San Antonio need to do against Miami's defense to correct that particular situation?
Well, I think it's one of those things where it's a blessing in disguise, that this is where you can shore up your offensive execution. And, Greg Popovich will show them the film, and he'll say, look at what happens when we do it the right way. He'll get to the fourth quarter clips, and you'll see all the wide open shots. You'll see, the certain areas where guys made good passes as compared to in the first quarter. And when you have that now, the Spurs know that they didn't play their best game, and they still got out with a victory. So it's even more incentive. There's more of an appreciation that as bad as we played last night, we still won. And when you have that, that's what makes it all worthwhile and gives them the incentive to come out and be better next game. You don't have to necessarily worry about slippage coming into play.
with that said, on the flip side, how does Miami continue to try to create? Because obviously there'll be new wrinkles in what Popovich does. What does Miami's defense need to do, in your opinion, to continue creating some havoc for San Antonio's offense?
Well, I think what they did yesterday was really good. You don't have to deviate from that. You just have to stay the course. You know, they got to 1 and 2 rotations, and then they didn't make the third rotation in the fourth quarter. You know, when you see that, that gives players, you know, encouragement as well to say, you know what, okay, if I do my job, then I'm able to have an impact or an effect on the game. It's when you don't do your job, those are the times where, you know, those are times that you have the sleepless moments in the game of basketball because you knew you could have done just a little bit more in order to be more effective.
Tim Duncan continues to be the ageless wonder. It was funny because just a couple of years ago, there were a lot of people, Bruce, that felt that Tim's days were numbered, and then Popovich made the brilliant move of really just lowering his minutes and limiting his opportunities during the regular season. Tim didn't play over 30 minutes this year. That's kind of been the case for him for the last several years. There are games he'll sit him out on, very similar to what Miami did this particular season with Dwayne Wade. But, I mean, the guy is just he's turned back the clock at this point. 9 of 10 yesterday, 21 points, 10 rebounds. Now, I get that Miami doesn't necessarily have anyone that can match up with him in the post, but you being a guy who played with him, how have you seen him change his game or just alter the way he approaches the game from when you played with him to what he's doing right now?
Well, the first thing was his weight, and he's playing at a lighter weight now. He understood that as I get older, I can't play with the same weight that I played with before because he was a different type of player before, because it was about getting the ball to him each and every time on the block. Now, he's a lot lighter. He takes care of his body. He's changed his diet. He eats differently. So as you get older, it becomes even more important to stay in shape year-round so you don't go through the struggles of trying to get back into shape and having an injury or something. So you have him more outside of the paint, setting pick and rolls. He sets the screen and he rolls to the basket. Now, the beautiful part about Tim Duncan rolling to the basket is the fact that he can get other guys involved as well. When he gets passes, it's not just for him to score. It's more for him to make the necessary play that will benefit his team. And he's one of the most willing passers in the game. He really enjoys seeing others receive a lot of glory and admiration for what they're doing, because in the end, by guys knocking down jump shots and spreading the floor, when they attack the basket and somebody rotates to help, Tim Duncan is there to score or make the assist on the next shot.
You listen to the NBA Lockdown podcast here. Bruce Bowen here. Jorge Sedano in for Israel Gutierrez. One last thing on LeBron as we look ahead to this series and just his new, I guess his next opportunity to try to put a stamp on this series. If you look at the numbers, Bruce, and it's interesting because I thought the Spurs defended him a lot differently in that first half than they did even in the last series against him last year during the finals. They didn't play off him as much. They were kind of playing on him a little more, and it allowed him to get into the paint. Meanwhile, in the second half, he didn't get to the paint as much. Now, did you notice anything different defensively? Did they play off him more, or do you think that was fatigue and the cramping and the heat and everything that was going on with the air conditioning?
No, I think they kind of started settling for whatever reason. You know, but Greg Popovich understands that LeBron James is a very intelligent basketball player. So what worked before doesn't always work when you try it again. Once LeBron has seen it, now he knows how to react to the team playing off of him. And basically, you got to get into them and try to make sure that you have guys that are going to make their necessary rotations within their defense and be there to meet him at the rim at different times. You know, I sometimes when you see guys settle for jump shots, it does show a sign of fatigue and trying to take it upon themselves to really get the team back into the game. Maybe it's a three-pointer. But I think it's dictated by what the Spurs are doing. When it's hard to get to the rim, then you start seeing guys settle instead of trying to get to the rim. I saw in the second half, Dwayne Wade, he started settling for a lot more jump shots, and then when he did take it inside, he was dealing with outstretched hands, trying to get the ball over outstretched hands of Tim Duncan or Thiago Splitter. And when you have that, because San Antonio is really they're very good at getting out to shooters, and they're very well prepared. So they pack the paint, and then they jump out to the shooters to contest.
Bruce, one last thing as we get ready for Game 2. What do you think? I don't know what your prediction for the series was. I would imagine it was San Antonio. I don't know what and how many games. How many games did you pick San Antonio in?
I picked them in 7.
Okay, so what do you expect in Game 2? Like, do you expect Miami to bounce back and even this thing up?
I do expect Miami to bounce back in a different way. I don't see the only thing that as compared to say like a Indiana. See, the Spurs, they're smart. They play disciplined basketball. So it's hard for me to necessarily say that Miami's going to get the next game. I don't have that vibe. But with the way they played up until the fourth quarter, I think that's great incentive for them. And it's all about how a team responds to their victory. I've said that before. And will the Spurs come out and respect that victory and follow it up with another? Or will they kind of feel like they've arrived and everything will be okay? I don't think that's in the character of this group. And I think that Miami, they can come out and they'll play the game closely. I don't know if they'll get the victory, though. I'm not 100% sure that Miami will get the victory, but I'm also not 100% sure that San Antonio will, because there are two different things from these games that the teams have seen from one another. Miami's version is, hey, we played great basketball for 3.5 quarters, and we need to have it for 4 quarters. Then you have the Spurs, who did not play basketball good for the first 3 quarters, due to what Miami was doing. It wasn't as if the Spurs just missed shots. They still shot 58% for the game and had an awesome fourth quarter. So I guess I'm gonna go with the home team here, George, just because of the opportunities that they didn't play so well in Game 1 at home, and they have a chance to redeem that.
You thought Miami played well in the first half? I mean, I know they hit shots, but they missed a ton of wide-open threes at the end of the second quarter, and I didn't think they played well defensively in the first half.
But on an opponent's floor. On an opponent's floor, they play well enough to get a victory. And that's basically what you want. Whenever you're on the road, I mean, they didn't get blew out as far as from jump ball. Next thing you know, oh, well, there it is. No, they play good basketball, and that's the heart, and that's what determines a champion, how well you play on the road, and if you can make the certain tweaks to necessarily get over the hump.
After LeBron left the game, by the way, here are the actual numbers. Final 7:31 of Game 1. The Heat scored 9 points, 4 of 10 from the field, 1 of 4 from downtown. The Heat led by 2 prior to that final 7:31. The Spurs had 26 points, 10 of 12 from the field, and 6 of 6 from downtown. So here's where we'll take a quick break. While the Heat was a problem for Miami, did Flip Saunders just turn up the heat on himself in the Great White North? We'll get into that in just a minute here on the NBA Lockdown Podcast.
Coming this summer, the 2014 FIFA World Cup from Brazil. Every goal.
The shot scores! The USA leads by 2!
Every save.
There's Germany up. Steal. Closer. Into the box. The shot is shot.
Every match. Wherever you are this summer, take the FIFA World Cup with you. It's on ESPN Radio and the ESPN Radio app.
He did make a run at a lot of other people first. They badly wanted Fred Hoiberg to leave Iowa State, to come back to the Wolves to be the coach. They talked to Billy Donovan as well. They talked to Tom Izzo. All those efforts kind of went nowhere. So at the end of the day, Flip Saunders, who really went into this saying that he preferred not to, that he wanted to focus on his front office duties, I think he felt like this was the best option at this point.
And that was our own Mark Stein, ESPN senior NBA writer on SportsCenter. Welcome back to the NBA Lockdown Podcast alongside Bruce Bowen. I'm Jorge Sedano in for Israel Gutierrez. So Flip Saunders is coming downstairs, Bruce, from the president's perch up there in Minnesota to coach the team. Look, we've seen plenty of guys do this. Stan Van Gundy will do this season in Detroit. Pat Riley did it for many years. Greg Popovich isn't, he's not the president, but he is he's certainly in charge. Or he is alongside R.C. Buford, making decisions on personnel. So a lot of guys that have impact upstairs will coach downstairs as well, and Flip is another one of those guys. Now, here's the thing, though. He had targeted one guy. Dave Yeager of the Memphis Grizzlies was the guy he wanted. Memphis decided to keep him. Do you think this is something that Flip wants to do long term, or do you think that he's going to groom someone? Because it looks like he's trying to add Chauncey Billups to the staff and maybe kind of get him up to speed. What do you make of Flip Saunders as a coach and trying to do both roles?
Well, I think he's a great basketball mind and a good coach. But I don't see any other option for Minnesota. You just don't want to bring somebody in just for the sake of filling a coaching position. You know, this is still a team that, Coach, Sanders, he knows about this group. He's coached there before. He loves the area. And so it's more about, I think, it's a solid move for someone saying, hey, you know what, if we can't get who we want, then I'll go ahead and do it, being that he definitely has the qualifications to do it. As far as grooming someone like Chauncey Billups, I think it's great. If Chauncey is truly sincere about it, hey, I think it's great, especially since Chauncey has ties there.
Yeah, Chauncey was played on that team before and certainly played for Flip. He coached them in 2004. So I think it makes some sense. I think that it's kind of a short stopgap situation, basically a Band-Aid. But really the big question is what's going to happen with Kevin Love, because Flip Saunders was asked the question the other day, Bruce, about, well, what are you going to do with Kevin Love? Are you going to try to move him before the season, during the draft? Are you going to try to move him during the season, trade deadline? And his response was, well, we'll have to wait and see who the coach is. Well, now we know who the coach is. He's the guy who's the president. So what do you do with Kevin Love? If you were in his situation, what would you do with Kevin Love right now?
I would try to get the best player I could for him. I mean, he's a talent, but he's a talent that doesn't want to be there.
But trade him right away? Like, do it now?
Trade him right. Why not? Because it's all about building around your brand. You don't want to wait during the season and you start out with him there and you have guys that are accustomed to having him there, or now the ball doesn't move like it used to because guys are starting to look at him in a certain way and he's feeling like, I got to get my numbers so I can keep my value up.
Yeah, I guess that's fair. And right, and you got to try to get, like, the best deal I've heard, at least the rumored deals, is Golden State, David Lee, and maybe either Harrison Barnes or Klay Thompson. I mean, first of all, if it's Klay Thompson and David Lee, you make that move in a heartbeat. Because the other teams that have been rumored, like the Celtics and whatnot, yeah, they've got a couple of picks, and one of them like the 5th or 6th pick, but it's not like you're getting one of those top 3 picks, whereas Golden State are giving you potentially 2 proven players in a potential trade scenario. What would you do that? Would you rather have proven guys, Bruce, or would you rather have picks in that situation?
No, give me proven guys. I don't want picks. The picks are too young. It's so much teaching that goes in with a lot of these young players coming into the game. They haven't been in college long. So give me somebody that I've kind of seen that I can kind of mold into shape, so to speak, or I know exactly what they do so that I can build around their strengths as compared to trying to figure out what their weaknesses are.
It's funny with Flip coming down here, Bruce, is, from the president's perch. There's still one guy out there who's on the president's perch that a lot of people want to see coaching. Some guy, you may have heard of him. His name is Phil Jackson. Maybe this inspires Phil to say, all right, forget it. I can't get who I want. I might as well coach the team too. You're getting to that point where you just don't want to stick anybody in that head coaching position because, it's not just about them. It affects you as well. And if you're making the decisions, people are going to start questioning those things, and you won't have a job too long as well. Yeah. Well, and if you're Melo and some of those veterans on that team, you're looking around and saying, okay, you couldn't get your boy Steve Kerr to coach. If you can't get Derek Fisher to come here, who the heck is going to coach this team? That's the thing. I mean, neither of those guys had experience to begin with. But it'll be interesting to see how that thing shakes down in New York. So anyhow, that'll do it for us here on the NBA Lockdown Podcast, live from San Antonio. Well, it's not live, actually, because you'll be listening to this, actually, whenever you want. But Bruce is actually in San Antonio, and we are doing this at some point, and it is live at some point. He's in San Antonio for the NBA Finals. I'm Jorge Sedano in for Israel Gutierrez. Izzy should be back for the next podcast on Monday. You guys enjoy the weekend and enjoy Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Bruce, always a pleasure, buddy. Good chatting with you.
Same here, partner.
Thanks for listening to the NBA Lockdown. For more great podcasts, visit the Pod Center page at ESPNradio.com.